Do I still need to hit it? They're not talking anymore. Okay. Jeez Louise, that was loud.
About 2 months ago, maybe 3 months, was it April? It was a couple of months ago. I saw
late April.
I saw Anna give a fantastic presentation at the New England Aquarium on designing virtual reality visualizations, and she's going to take you through the whole thing. So I'm really excited that I reached out to her after seeing the presentation. I'm really excited she's here to show to all of you what she's been doing over there. So let's get a nice round of applause for Anna Asnes Becker.
Oh boy. Cool, thank you. My name's Anna Asnes Becker. I work at the Wall Street Journal doing graphics, interactive graphics and developing news apps. And I've been there for a couple of years. A funny thing about making stuff for VR is that when I talk about it, a lot of people know a lot less than one might assume about what VR actually is. It's like this hot topic getting talked about left and right. But I'll break it down of what it actually consists of. So here's a 2D line chart. There we go in fancy 3D. VR is a 3D environment. It could be 360 video or rendered that's split into two different views for your left and right eyes, so you feel like you are immersed in the rendered world. It's pretty crazy. Plus there's a thing on your head right now that view's in there. Real world's out here, VR's in there. Okay, if you don't have a Google Cardboard or some other cardboard viewer, you should go get it. They're $5. I found that just quickly Google searching for Google Cardboard for sale. So yeah, it's a game changer. If you don't have one, I would very, very much recommend go getting one for $5. Cool. Why is it cool? It's because it hacks your brain. Your mind is tricked into believing that you are present in the world that is rendered rather than, or in addition to, the world around you. And the in addition to part is an interesting thing because that gets into augmented reality, which I'm not even going to really touch on in this. And the last time I gave this talk, it was even less relevant, but now everybody's playing Pokemon Go and augmented reality is totally a thing. And I wish I had a whole talk about that, but I don't yet. Anyway, VR is really freaking cool because if you see yourself on the edge of a precipice or something like that, your body reacts in a way that would indicate that you're actually there. It's scary, you feel it. If your arms are out in front of you and you see some arms in front of you on a table and you see a virtual spider crawling on your virtual arm, little, shocks run up your arm. It's pretty bonkers. I don't have very many better words to describe it than bonkers. Yeah, if you've got that in the headset, you're scared. Weird. So it's a super new medium, which we all know, but so the first, I guess, journalistic endeavor, and it sort of goes without saying, or it did at OpenVisConf, I guess, but I'm a journalist, and so I'm talking about data visualizations in VR mostly, and sort of VR in general, from the perspective of journalism, VR journalism. So the first real prominent piece of VR journalism was Nani de la Peña's Hunger in Los Angeles, which debuted in January 2012. In July 2014, Google debuted the Cardboard, which is obviously the low-cost VR viewer, and that is really a game changer because that means that you can make stuff. If you're a big media organization like the Wall Street Journal, you can make a piece for VR, and everybody with $5 can look at it, which is still a barrier to entry for some, but it's a game changer. You don't have to go out and buy an Oculus anymore. You can use a literal piece of cardboard. So it's been 2 years. That's nothing. It's brand new. So there's two kinds of content being created for VR. The lion's share of it thus far has been in 360-degree video. Most news and media outlets have sort of tested the waters there. Some notable ones are, and there have been a proliferation of these, and it's really exciting. Harvest of Change by the Des Moines Register, The Displaced about Syrian refugees from New York Times Magazine, and we did one about sort of tracing the life of a performer at Lincoln Center behind the scenes, and that was really interesting as well. But what I want to talk more about is rendered environments and what you can make in the browser and using 3D rendering software, rather than a whole hell of a lot of GoPros, which is what you need to make 360 video. They're making new 360-degree cameras are being developed and popularized, but mostly it's just this weird 3D printed rig and a whole shit ton of GoPros. The way we did it at the journal was using 3JS, which is a JavaScript library. It's open source. And a lot of people are using Unity increasingly. That's the most popular software that I've seen for people making VR content. So what I want to see more of are people taking advantage of the experiential quality that looking off a precipice that shocks up your arm quality of VR that's unique to VR to tell data-driven stories. And that's not really been explored that much so far. One person that's been exploring it, his name is Brian Trills, and he was a Knight Fellow, I think, at POV, and now he has his own company called Datavised, and he's developed something called the Web VR Toolkit, which is a really good resource for starting your own VR projects. Let me see if I can make this video play. Yes, winning at technology. Cool, so he maps data about cities into a 3D environment. So these red areas, I believe, are higher crime zones or places where crimes have been committed recently. So if you're walking or navigating through this map and you have it in stereoscopic view and you find yourself in an area that's red, it sort of triggers this instinct of oh, this is dangerous, because it draws on a basic human understanding of color and space. And that is cool. That is cool as hell. That is using VR very successfully to tell a data story. One that was done recently, in between the last time I gave this talk and today, was developed by the Google News Lab, and Simon Rogers wrote an excellent piece that's on Medium about what they learned from making this interactive guide to Brexit. It was Google searches that different nations were doing about Brexit. And I'm just going to show you guys some GIFs, because here we are. Will the UK Brexit? It's you point the viewer at different countries, and it showed you what the most popular Google searches about Brexit were, which is cool, pretty cool. I think the best part about it was the piece he wrote as a follow-up that listed we came to a lot of the same conclusions, I guess, about the challenges of VR and designing for it, which I will get to very shortly. So Wall Street Journal made something also, which is why I'm here. And I'm going to show you a demo of it. Ready, go. It's just a video. So the chart shows the NASDAQ starting in 1994 and up until the present day. So this would be before the boom in 1999 and 2000, where it reached its first sort of giant peak. The price to earnings ratio, or actually the inverse of the price to earnings ratio, is mapped as that path in the center, the more opaque path. So as you can see, the path is really narrow and skinny, and the price to earnings ratio is an indicator of market volatility. So basically, the skinnier the path in this visualization, the more volatile the market. So man, if that doesn't really give you the feeling of the market crashing, I don't know what would. So the later point of this visualization was sort of to answer the question, is the market in another bubble? That's what the piece was called, actually. And as you're kind of climbing back towards recent time and the chart ends at when the NASDAQ broke, and it was released as NewsPeg 2 when the NASDAQ broke its prior record from the year 2000, which was about a year ago now. You can see that the path that you're walking on becomes wider and wider. It's sort of a gradual, stable, uphill slope. So we thought that really the best, most evocative way we could communicate that the market is in really different shape than it was in 2000 was with this visualization. And then we put a rocket ship mode in it just because we could. Yeah, so you can look back, see the entirety of the chart, and then do it in super speed in case you really want to do that. So we used the Google Chrome VR template, which is a good place to start for creating VR projects. We used D3.js to handle the data, and 3.js for the 3D rendering, and these are open source libraries. Also, Roger Kenny, who I worked with on this project, is the man. He's the man. He handled the lion's share of the development on this project. I was very involved in design and concept, but I really got to take my hat off to Roger. He is awesome. And he wrote a tutorial on sort of the basics of how to get a data viz project started in VR, which you can find at this link. And I have a resources slide at the end, and I've put them all together on my website as well. And the link to that is at the end too, so don't worry about trying to write down this link. It's, unless you really want to, because it's a really good, nice link. Anyway, I just told you all about why we did it. Don't need to talk about that anymore. Why do we do it in the browser? That's another interesting thing, because anyone can look at it. Like, I guess in the browser, I mean like using browser technologies rather than using video. Because at the time, like a year ago, in order to display 360 video in the browser, you had to go through all these like third-party players, and you were dealing with stitching this gigantic video file. It was super tedious. Like doing it with open source, like web development, like process was so much easier and more awesome. But there were a lot of challenges also. First being, it's a giant user interaction challenge. How do you design an interactive graphic when your user has no hands? Their hands are holding this thing on their head. How do you interact with something that way? You really only have a couple of inputs. The Google Cardboards have one button on the side, and like comparable cardboard viewers all have mostly have a button. So you've got button and the focal point of your view. So wherever is the center of where you're looking, that's sort of like where your mouse is, or metaphorical mouse. And then it sort of leaves a whole other problem of how you control motion in that space. It was a conundrum. To select buttons, you also had to think about an element of time, because how do you click other than, how do you click? So it was that you had to focus, like keep that center of focus on a button for like 3 seconds, and we had a stoplight metaphor of like red, yellow, green. Google has like an expanding circle metaphor, but that was something we had to think about a whole new paradigm for. But possibilities might open up when more people are using headsets in conjunction with joysticks or other controllers. Like right now, it seems like I've seen people using headsets with game controllers. Google Daydream is a new thing, and that's going to have its own controller. The HTC Vive has its own unique controllers. But trying to design for all those different sets of controllers right now really poses a giant challenge. So to create like widely accessible, or even sort of comparatively widely accessible VR interactive graphics, the controls have to be very minimal. Information density is another challenge. It has to be kind of low, because it's hard to read text in VR. It's really hard to encode very much information in that environment. And actually, as Simon Rogers from the Google News Lab points out, the more text you have in a VR environment, the more likely your users are to be nauseous. Eye strain and nausea are real things in VR. It's like a big concern. And it was something that we thought about a lot in designing VR NASDAQ, because we wanted the users to flow along a path that was accurate to the data, but at the same time representing every single data point in that motion, in that space, would make for a pretty bumpy ride, and it already is a pretty bumpy ride. So making a balance of sort of smoothing out the viewer's sort of trajectory along the path, but remaining accurate to the data, was sort of a judgment call on our part, which sort of gets into like ethics and being accurate and a whole other box of trouble metaphor. I'm having trouble with metaphors right now. Anyway, people also aren't generally that good at understanding data encoded in 3D. Here is a picture. This picture is about the best ways that we understand data, visually encoded data. And I cribbed this straight from another presentation that Peter Aldous from BuzzFeed gave at NICAR this year. So basically the forms of presentation on the top, like bar charts, slope, line charts, angle, which I guess would be a pie chart. Those are what we're best at understanding, comparing data in. And then near the bottom, down there is volume, which basically is like, we just don't know how to understand real, like comparing real numbers and volume is just not what our brains are meant to do. That, and if you make something for a new medium just for the sake of making something new and flashy, Twitter is gonna make fun of you, and so will Hacker News. I mean, but we've all been there, right? Right? Right. Cool. Also, people don't have headsets. People have Google Cardboards. Lots of people don't even have Google Cardboards. So it's like when you're making stuff like this, still really necessary to have a fallback. And then there's the issue of cross-device compatibility. And I'll show you a little flow chart. Who laughed? Cross-device compatibility. Did I hear somebody laugh about that? Yeah, it's pretty funny. I'm going to show a chart that we had to make, or a flow chart that we made when we were trying to figure out how to display one of our 360 video VR pieces across multiple devices. Ready? Yeah, that's awesome. That's no fun. That's yet to be worked out. So the rundown, VR line chart versus a 2D line chart. You get a third dimension to work with, which isn't unique to VR, but with VR you do get that magic brain hacking feeling, but you lose interactions, you lose the ease of navigation, you lose accessibility and viewership, you lose legibility, you lose information density, you lose perceptual accuracy, and there's more of a risk that people will make fun of you on Twitter. So what's it good for? I don't know. I think it's exciting, and I think we'll all figure it out together. I think that multi-dimensional data will be interesting. Like, I'm thinking about the really fantastic yield curve graphic that the New York Times had, and how they mapped sort of multiple different metrics onto one 3D sort of object or chart. So imagining that with the additional dimension of time or motion, that's really exciting to think about. And there's using people's feelings about space to communicate stuff about data sets. What? Yeah, I don't know. What are people's feelings about space? Like, I've never really thought about this as a graphic designer or web developer before. Like, maybe architects think about this all the time, but I haven't had to think about this for my job, like, ever. So I made a quick list about some feelings we all might have about space, and if there's any architects in here that could help me make this list better, I would really appreciate it. Okay, feelings about space. Fear of heights. Walking on small areas is difficult. Red might mean danger. Moving quickly feels different than moving slowly. You guys can read, but I'm gonna read it anyway. Flying is cool. Pointy things might hurt. Large things might be heavy, et cetera, forever. Like, help me with this list. I'm like, this is an interesting brain teaser. I don't know. If you guys have any more ideas, like, come tell me them whenever I'm done doing this thing. Is it a fad? Is something people keep asking me, and I don't think so at all. Kids really like it, and kids are the future of computing. In 10 years, you know, you remember that video of the kid with the magazine being like, why is this iPad broken? I think it's kind of gonna be like that. I think it's that revolutionary. I think that VR is the future of computing. So now I'm gonna show you some of the coolest stuff I've ever seen. Cool. The machine to be another. So these two people in each of their headsets are seeing each other's bodies because they have to agree on each action. So they're seeing each other through their eyes. And that is like the coolest shit I've ever seen. HTC Vive and the tilt brush, you can make a drawing and then you can stand inside the drawing. You can make the drawing in 3D and like draw all around your head. I did that yesterday for the first time and it was very exciting. And I made one for my friend. It says, hi Joe. Look, it's 3D. Hi Joe. Oculus Toybox. You can be, here, I found a GIF of this too. You can be in different physical spaces, but the same virtual space as somebody. Like this person could be in like New York, this person could be in California or something, but there you are like throwing stuff at each other in this virtual toy land. That is the coolest shit I have ever seen. That is so cool. TriBeCa Film Fest Interactive website is a great place. It's a great resource for like some of the most interesting, most innovative stuff that people are doing with VR in terms of filmmaking and just in general. So that's a really fantastic resource to check out for more of the coolest shit you've ever seen. And that's it. Thanks. I admit, 2 bonus slides. But I'll take any questions also, maybe first.
You mentioned space and a little bit you mentioned time and speed. What about gravity? Does it really change the perception at all?
I don't know, let's find out.
I mean, you had the right up and down, right?
Yeah.
Is spinning of gravity involved there?
Well, I think that that's sort of inherent to how you would understand the sort of speed of going through that space. Like on the downhills, you went faster because that's how gravity works. So incorporating that sort of natural feeling of gravity, I think made the experience more immersive because it was more like what you feel like in the world around you anyway.
Thanks for the talk. So having shipped a web app for a major media company, do you think that it would be better for VR if the majority of users in the future utilized the web to access virtual reality? Or do you think a virtual reality OS or a virtual reality app would be better, and why? Thanks.
Sure. For right now, I think I can only speak, I guess, from the perspective of like what I'm doing, what I'm developing for, which is like how to get this experience into the most people's hands at sort of the lowest barrier to entry. And so to me, for right now, it seems that having VR apps native in the browser is the best way. But I don't know, I was on that ship too. I was all mobile web versus apps, and we all know how that panned out. So I don't know, I'm on the web team, but I think that sort of gets to be a complicated point, but that's how I feel about it right now.
Thank you. Thanks for your presentation.
Thanks.
I have a question on monetization. I mean, given that you're a Wall Street Journal, what are the journal's thoughts in terms of how to monetize this technology? And I also point out, I'm also interested in what the New York Times is doing, where there seems to be a clear delineation. They seem to have really two separate tracks going on VR. You know, one is an editorial track, and the other is, I guess it's the T-brand track that will do VR content, you know, for corporations and so on a paid basis. But
Oh, I'm not so sure about that. I work in the newsroom, and it's my job to tell stories in the most interesting way I possibly can. Hey, Sarah. So I don't know. Yeah.
Thanks, Anna, for right here.
Oh, hey,
what's up?
hi.
Question about like the idea of like plugins. Like, is there like any way to like have live feeds of, let's say, something like this, like a live stream like Twitter or something popping up in there to kind of like when I'm looking around and I'm like, oh.
Yeah, man, it's a web app.
Oh,
You can put
cool.
whatever you want in there.
Oh, nice.
In short.
Have you guys worked on, or have you learned anything from the video game projects working on VR, or like are there any shared knowledges between teams like that?
You mean from the video? Did you say video game or video team? At
Video games.
video games. I don't know too much about that yet. I'm working on learning Unity, and I'm really excited about that. I know a lot of people developing games are working in Unity, but that's pretty much as I know about it. But I'm definitely interested to learn more. I played this game with a fox yesterday. Man, that was really fun. If anyone's played that fox game, that was cool.
Hi, I have a question about like, have you had any feedback from the stuff that you've developed, and if you were going to improve on it, what would you do?
If it was to improve on this particular project,
Yeah, the project.
this is kind of the only one that we've made so far, or that I've worked on. That's a VR data viz project. But I talked to Simon Rogers, who worked on the one from Google News Lab. And I think the feedback is generally like, the feedback for ours was pretty overwhelmingly positive. We did get a little bit made fun of, but you know, what are you gonna do? But I think the fact that it used the medium and used the expressiveness of it in the like you're falling down, and that's, you know, it tells a story of the crash and uses your whatever feelings about space. So people were very receptive to it because it used the medium specifically so well. But I think for a lot of other things, people are just sort of like, this is interesting, what next? Like, if we're looking around and we can see Google searches and we're in VR, and that's really cool, but what else? I'm really interested to see what people continue to make as far as data viz in VR, because I think we've really just scratched the surface. I guess the feedback has been, it's just sort of unknown territory. What I would improve about what we did is I would, oh boy, there was a long list. I'll have to get back to you on that one.
What kind of usability research did you do going into it, and what sort of elements were considered when?
Oh, that's funny. We had like 2 weeks to make this thing, so.
I guess also if
None.
you were to redo it, what kind of usability research would you do, and how would that be done in this setting?
Usability research is an interesting thing in a newsroom because we don't often have enough time to do it. So I wish I had more insight into that, and I wish that we'd thought about it more. Right now, well, the process that we had for this interactive was just like put it on everybody's head who's like around and would be down to test it and like see if they feel nauseous or not. And so basically, because we had to make it so fast, we did not have that much time for user testing at all. But we should have. We should have. And I hope we do in the future.
Hi, I just
Hi.
have a question about just the data capture. Like, what kind of tools or resources did you use to capture like such a
To capture,
all the data that you had? I'm assuming it was like a massive amount of data.
we, I guess, used the market data group that we use for most of our sort of information on stocks I don't even know where that comes from. I just know that it's like a nice, lovely package that we get to we get to use at the end. I don't know. Maybe someone else from the journal has like a little more insight on that than me. But we have our own teams that do market data research. Hi.
Hi. Thank you for the talk. The one thing that you said that surprised me is the fact that you said that right now for low density data, do you think that that's a phenomena of the media itself or the state of the tools and the paradigms that currently exist?
I think it's both. I think that until the technology advances quite a lot, it's going to be difficult to read text in VR. And I think that if you're trying to annotate things, so until the visibility gets better, the legibility, and until there's like a standardized controller so that you can make interfaces with more complicated controls to access a greater volume of data, I think those are the main barriers to making more complicated data visuals in VR right now.
Oh, hi. So, what do you think is the relationship between VR and AR in the future? Because I know Microsoft is building HoloLens, and Magic Leap is also coming out with a different AR headset.
Well, Magic Leap is doing some other kind of like, well, that's some whole different stuff. I don't even know how to understand what they're doing. Anyway, they're super cool. VR and AR together, sorry I cut you off. Was that the basis of your question?
Yeah, I was just going to add that there's like, it's not just like you can only do one thing on one platform. Like, there was like a Minecraft demo from HoloLens that is also like into gaming, and you can see your apps and stuff like that. So what do you think would be like the main difference between the two?
I don't, like the main difference between VR and AR, or how they would work together.
Yeah, as in like, what do you think about like their relationship in the future together, like whether they'll coexist?
I think that there's a lot of different potential for mixed reality. I think that both VR and AR will probably continue to be developed and explored. I would definitely think that. I think that one of the first things that really got me excited about AR was Pokemon Go. Sorry, this last slide of my presentation was who wants to talk about me. Well, we just skipped past this part that was my grandparents' TriBeCa. This was my filler at the end of OpenVisConf because nobody asked me any questions, or there were like 2 questions. You guys are like way more talkative than they were. Yeah, I don't know. I think there's different niches for VR and for AR, and I think the most interesting part of both of those that I've been thinking about this week as I've been playing Pokemon Go is that AR, or this particular AR game, has caused me to make new friends and interact with people that I would not have interacted with otherwise in my physical space. Whereas with VR, to use the example of Oculus Toybox that I showed earlier, is that you can bridge physical spaces and be in the same virtual space. So I think that the interesting, sort of the crux of what's most interesting about VR versus AR to me is how people will interact in those spaces. I think one of the downsides that people say about VR is that you are kind of isolated in this experience on your own. And the Oculus Toybox is the first thing that I've seen. There might be a bunch of other stuff out there. And the machine to be another is another thing that sort of lets you understand another person's point of view. But I guess it'll come down to different ways of socializing using AR and VR. I think that's going to be really exciting to see.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you. This was super, super cool.
Thank you.
So I have a question about the actual interactivity. So in the visualization you showed us, you can kind of walk around and look around.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you imagine, like, whatever once technology catches up?
Yeah.
Would you interact with data in terms of like touching it or like
Whoa,
pushing
there's
it? I don't know.
there's
It's
so
like-
many ways. It sort of gets back to that interminable forever list of like what's like what are physical interactions that we have with the world around us that communicates data to us that we don't even realize, like picking something up and it's heavy, or like maybe there will be touch sensors in the future and well, there will be like more haptics and you can pick something up and it'll be heavy, and that its weight will communicate data, or its texture, like you were saying, or its position in a three-dimensional space, or color, or it's like all the tools we have currently at our disposal, plus, I don't know, ones I've never even thought of, like motion through space. There's so many. Really excited to see. I keep saying that, but it's because I am really genuinely excited. I hope you guys are also a little more than you were an hour ago, at least.
Hi, thanks for the talk. I have a question regarding the commercial and advertising space. Do you see there is a potential opportunity for display commercial advertising in the VR landscape?
Yeah, that was interesting. Can we put an ad in it is something that we heard, I think. And we were just sort of like, what do you mean? What are you talking about? Put an ad in it? I don't know. Like I was saying earlier, I guess I'm on the editorial side, so I think I sort of try to think about advertising as little as possible. But I'm sure people will be trying to figure that exact question out very soon.
I've tried a couple different varieties of VR in terms of moving through the space. So looking down at your shoes, focal point, game controllers. Did you do any research in terms of how to do it and what works and what doesn't work and why?
You mean by like trying other VR
In terms of being able to move through the space. Currently you have it so that you're timed, so it's sort of like you're in this cart.
Yeah, it's sort of like, it's like a cart and then it stops, like a train that stops. Well, we had it, right now you can touch the side button to stop and go, or we had it so that you were going to look down at your shoes, but then that people weren't really able to do that as well, because it was like you had to look down at your feet, but then also wait for it to activate. It was, I guess we just did some testing within the newsroom, like I was talking about before. I think maybe a point that I didn't make earlier was that this entire project pretty much got made in 3 weeks. And by mainly, it was a very small team. So we didn't have a heck of a lot of time. And it sort of came out of the blue too. Roger was like, let's make something in VR. And I was like, let's make it a roller coaster. And then it was like, oh God, the deadline's in 3 days. And so that's how testing went.
Hi. Over here. Sorry. Thank you so much for the presentation. So when it comes to data visualization, a lot of times you need to be very careful about, especially in editorial and news, being honest with the data and trying not to sort of deceive the audience through scaling and different types of coloring and things like that. So what do you think are the unique challenges that you guys faced in terms of trying to keep the information honest and not deceive the user?
Right. Well, the main one, which I did touch on a little bit earlier, was whether or not we had like a smoothing algorithm for the path along the NASDAQ, and sort of we had weekly data, and weekly data was incredibly bumpy. And so we had this sort of smoothed path that the user goes on, instead of like mapping every single data point or having the camera change along every single data point. And that was one of those blurry areas of like, well, you can see the data, but if the motion is the data visualization, it's sort of like making a line chart with splines instead of straight slopes. But we had to go with it. There was that sort of compromise between usability and sort of accuracy, complete accuracy to the data. But I don't think, I think it was an acceptable compromise in this case, but it was one that we did think about.
Hi.
Hey, thanks for the presentation. And there's a lot of good Pokemons around here, just so you know.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Okay, I told a friend of mine, or a friend offered to like, I was like, if I'm really bombing, set a lure in here.
There's really good ones. But my question is, I'll get to it.
Yo, did you do it?
Yeah.
Don't tell me that. You did?
What's so what would be the next set of data that you guys would like to explore? Because what you guys seem to do is you're turning data into a physical landscape in order to experience that. But also, I remember a few weeks earlier, I was here for a presentation, and it was about how you would access or bias or see the bias of a data. So would you use it to experience data as a physical landscape, or would you see it as a different way so you can see the data so it would be fair or manipulated?
Whoa. I'm not sure exactly what your question
What your
focuses
set
on.
of exploration of data set would be.
I'm sorry.
Next type of data.
The next.
Yeah.
The next.
Now it's like linear graph, and you're experiencing it like a roller coaster.
Right.
Yeah.
I think the next, what's the next one is the question that I've been thinking to myself for the last year and change, because I haven't really thought of a good reason to use VR for data viz since then. But I'm convinced that there is a good reason to do it, and reasons are out there, and data sets to explore are out there, and different new ways to explore them as a landscape or maybe something more abstract than that. But I don't know, maybe I'm just not that creative, but I haven't thought of one yet. But if anyone else does, let's talk about it.
Do you feel like the visualization industry for VR is in a sort of neonatal phase, especially for financial data, where our ideas are based on what graphs are we currently showing, and how can we put that in a VR environment, and like, here's this time series graph.
Yeah.
And then what kind of change is going to be needed where we don't think about, let's present a graph that our readers currently can get value out of in 1 to maybe 8 seconds, and give them an experience that takes 1 minute and 40 seconds to maybe get that same information. Do you think that there's a new kind of data set or a new kind of visualization? Or is that what you're thinking about for version 2, 3, 4, that will let people feel like that investment of 2 minutes looking at this graph is going to give me a better understanding of the data than what I currently get in maybe 1 to 5 seconds?
Well, I think it's arguable that the experiential qualities in the VR NASDAQ do give you a more, because people were looking at the line charts, sort of that 2D rendering of, here, I'll skip back to the very beginning. Sorry, lots of flashing screens. This view, or just the very, everybody saw this one, and everybody was still saying oh my God, the NASDAQ's gonna crash again. We're still it's gonna be this bubble. It's just like 2000, and it's the same data. It's the same data set. Missing the price to earnings ratio, but I think that viewing it experientially, physically, sort of really drives the point home that the market environment was quite different. So I do think that you get more out of the extended experience than you do in 5 to 8 seconds looking at this, the 5-second test or whatever, looking at an infographic. But I also think that there will be more and more different ways to explore the unique medium of VR. As people make more, and as people, as viewers get more comfortable with it, I think it'll be incremental. My friend Brian, who was doing data vised and POV, we were talking about sort of innovating for VR experiences, and he was like, it's like a filmmaking assignment, and when you get the assignment, and the assignment is to show time, and the first thing you think of is, oh, I'm gonna have a clock, and it's gonna show time. I'll have a little movie of a clock. And then that's the first super literal, super direct idea. And then after that, you're oh, that was dumb. Let me think of a way more interesting way to show time than a clock. You could show the sun rising and setting, I don't know, a million ways. But I think we're still at the clock. like the VR NASDAQ, like that's still the clock. And we're gonna find more ways that are better suited to the medium as people get used to it and get used to the ideas of it.
Hi again. You mentioned 360 a little bit, but what do you think will change? Both Facebook and Google, I mean YouTube in particular, introduced 360 video, and Facebook now supports 360 photos as well. How do you think it will change in terms of social media side? Will it bring more viewers to it? Any other things that might change for your particular business?
Well, I think that YouTube and Facebook integrating 360 video and 360 photos are just kind of like, it serves to get people used to it. You know, it's sort of available widely. More and more people will start doing it. You know, you see one on your friend's Facebook and then you try it out and whatever. So I think for adoption, that's going to be pretty key. Other than that, I don't know. Guys, I don't really know that much more stuff. You keep asking me stuff, and I'm like running out of things to say to everybody. Don't ask me any basic math. I can't. I'm kidding, sort of. You're gonna. Please don't say 2 + 2.
I think this might be one of the last questions.
Okay.
Awesome presentation. It was awesome.
Thank
if
you.
You could go to the chart, the 3D chart there.
Oh, which one? This one?
Yeah, right there. Just decoding the chart. It's really impressive, and you said you only did it in a couple days, and I was wondering, so as you're immersed in the VR environment, maybe putting like a timeline, like the London whale boss or Kim Jong-un fired another nuclear weapon or whatever, going through and being immersed in the environment, and then picking a timeline, and then seeing the market fluctuation all together, and then being immersed in some sort of other third-party data or content. I think that would be the next kind of, the next step with that.
That sounds cool. Yeah, that sounds really cool. Like, let's do it. You want to do it? Anyway.
That's it. No, we're not going to take any more.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next month. Bye-bye.